I watched and I listened, silent in my guard. I was a killer without equal, a prodigy in 1,000 arts, and yet with such tools I was granted, my task remained ever elusive. Not a warrior, nor sage, not an assassin, nor leader of men. I was a companion to one who could never truly love. Constantin Valdor, the Emperor's Spear, first of the 10,000, friend. As Captain General of the Custodian Guard during the events of the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy, his role was one of crushing responsibility and brutal sorrow. Few would ever claim to know this lonely soul, even those amongst the legendary custodians. Grim and determined, wise and cunning, Valdor was truly inhuman, separated as he was from the ranks of humanity through genetic artifice and endless duty. Not even the Primarchs would be so far different as he, for they were blessed with brothers and children aplenty. Valdor instead would stand with only two others in his life, Malcador the Sigillite and the Emperor of Mankind. In this role would he serve loyally, a bodyguard, matched only by the mightiest beings in existence, an advisor of tactical ingenuity and administrative genius, and as a confidant to one so far ascended as to recognize no equal, not even with his favored son. Thus then does the legend fade into history, 1,000 names, each one a tale of heroism in its own right, vanished with the light of the Emperor. To serve in the shadow of one so great is to be consumed by it, a fate only a friend could take. Perhaps unsurprising, Valdor's origin is one of mystery and dark secret. Only his importance to the Emperor can be certainly defined, for though his part had yet to be played, the Emperor moved armies and searched whole continents for the young child that would become the first Custodes. Why, is a question that would perhaps reveal much of fell portents and ancient pact made beneath the auspice of broken prophecy. To those unaware of the efforts made by the Emperor long ago, however, the answer was obvious. The man that child would soon become was worth 1,000, nay 1,000,000 others, for rare is it to find such a sublime blend of loyalty and genius combined. To Valdor, however, it would be a question without much reason. His memory of such innocence was long forgotten once the Emperor acquired him, his fate sealed as he underwent the arcane surgeries required to elevate one to the ranks of the Custodian Guard. As such, here begins his story, the first of the Custodians, though Valdor was never certain if this were true or if he was merely the first to survive the process. His place in history assured, he would join the Emperor in his grand conquests across Terra, focused entirely upon the unification of the now shattered world of yore. One of the first major conflicts that Valdor would take part in was the infamous Battle of Mol and Sen. One of the first major pushes by the budding Imperial forces, it would see the deployment of an entire legion of the newly created Thunder Warriors, alongside the Emperor, Constantine, and 30 of the Custodian Guard. Accompanied by several specialist regiments of the Imperial Army, the Emperor's forces would prove formidable. The Morland-Sen Confederacy was a prime example of the darkness the Emperor wished to dispel from Terra, for their forces were comprised of rampant genetic engineering and foul magic borrowed at great cost from the fell powers of the Warp. Though they would suffer heavy casualties, the Thunder Warriors and the Custodians would eventually shatter a force several times larger than theirs, slaying the priest-king of their foe in the process. It would be here, however, that Valdor would note the feral nature of his comrades and grow concerned at the Thunder Warriors' reckless bloodlust that seemed beyond control. Still, momentum had been gathered, and so would Valdor lead his elite forces in countless strikes across the world, sealing fast Terra's destiny as the heart of Imperial dominion. During one such excursion, would he be tasked with the assassination of Koja Zu, minister of the Anuatan Steppes, who had used ancient technology to steal the last drops of water from the oceans. Her crimes knew no mercy, but for reasons unknown, Valdor would claim her son for the Custodians, to join their ranks as Ra-Endymion. Nation after nation fell, the complexities not lost but irrelevant to the master of the Custodians. All were enemies of the Emperor, all were foes against progress, and the specifics of their crimes paled in comparison to the defiance showed by any who doubted the master, whose shadow he followed. Thus then did Terra emerge from the age of strife, ruled now by three: the Emperor of Mankind, Malcador the Sigillite, and Constantin Valdor, the First Companion. Such an emergence from anarchy was not painless, however, and though the losses of those who stood against the Emperor were well documented, the plight of those first loyal to him was not. On the fields of Mount Ararat would the Thunder Warriors, already heathen in their fury, reveal their knowledge of the curse built into their very DNA by the Emperor of Mankind. Cursed to short lives, little more than tools to a heartless lord, the Thunder Warriors sought vengeance for their suffering. They would not go quietly into that long good night, and upon the steep slopes they had once fought for, they made their stand against a tyrant, no different than those of old. Legend states that Valdor himself, now a hero to the nascent Imperium, would take the field at the head of his custodian force and fresh-founded Legions Astartes. Here in the mire and muck, as cold winds blew like revenant memory through the corpses, would the Thunder Warriors face their last, a final stand of defiance against the cold ethics of practicality. With their death, however, would Terra be secured. The forces of the Imperium now turned their gaze outward upon the galaxy, hungry to reclaim what was once theirs. The engines of industry churned into action, the gene labs delved into forgotten arts, and mankind once more readied itself for a crusade as yet unmatched. None would ever accuse the custodians of idleness, however, and though many were certain in the might of the Imperium, ever would Valdor's eyes be watching the shadows, hunting out those whose bitterness was hidden carefully from sight. Paranoia, perhaps, but justified in this war of shadows, for the Grand Provost of the Adeptus Arbites, Uwomakandawire, had discovered the truth of the Thunder Warriors and of their unsanctioned execution under the orders of Valdor himself. In the great chamber of the Senatorum Imperialis, a lone Custodes waited to greet the invaders. Constantin Valdor himself, adorned fully in the panoply of war, stood lonely against the host of rebellion and vengeance flame. Here did he urge them to surrender, but the rage of the Thunder Warriors and the desperation of Astarte could know no quenching by simple words. With a roar was battle met, Valdor stepping forth as from the shadows emerged the might of the First Legion Astartes. The battle quickly turned into a massacre. The 10,000 Astartes summoned forth into the vast hall, superior in technology and teamwork to their predecessors. Valdor himself was a blur of motion, caught haywire within the conflict, and unmatched by any who crossed blades with his dreaded spear. Eventually were the rebels crushed, Ushotan dying at the hands of Valdor as he expressed his sorrow and pity towards the favored son. Valdor could not understand, for he had long respected the Primarch, but that was perhaps the point. Empty of feeling and hollow of light, Valdor was the Emperor's shadow in every way, mimicking actions without passion nor intent. Fortunately, with the palace coup ended, Terra returned to a modicum of stability. Astartes' plans were halted both by the bravery of Simonus and the Emperor's own suspicions, and the Grand Provost was allowed to retire in peace, for Valdor could not fault one truly loyal to the Imperium, no matter how misguided their attempts. Instead, efforts turned to the expansion of the Imperium. The legions Astartes were finally unleashed, and the Emperor took to the helm to guide his armies in their conquest. In response, would Valdor join him, side by side with 300 custodians, known then after as the Emperor's companions. This unique force would fight across 1,000 worlds against the most terrible odds. Even by the elite standards of the Adeptus Custodes would these individuals become legends each, masters without peer and friends, personally with the Emperor himself. Valdor would be chief amongst them, and his prowess would be unmatched by any but the Primarchs later found, one by one, as the Imperium grew endlessly in every direction. The discovery of these lost sons did not fill Valdor with joy, however, for once already had he seen loyalty shattered by those with powers too dangerous to unleash without concern. He knew the dark gods had taken them, and his surprise at their survival was obvious. Even more so when he learned of the Emperor's intent to find them once again. for he could not imagine that the powers in the warp had left them unsullied and pure. Instead, he argued that vast armies of mortals should be raised, their own frailty counter to the threat of rebellion, and above each force should a member of the Custodes be placed, for their faith was inviolable, their loyalty beyond doubt.